my vocation story to the priesthood really began before I was born, because as many of you might be aware, my father was murdered when my mother was 6 months pregnant with me. And that obviously was a great tragedy for my mother and in our family life, but I was pretty immune to it. I was in my mother's womb. I didn't know what was going on. But my mom, Louise Naumann, was a great woman of faith. And she obviously was very hurt by this tragedy in her life. It totally changed the trajectory of what she thought her marriage and family life was going to be. But as I got to be a teenager, I would talk to family and friends and ask them, friends of my parents, what that was like at that time. And they would tell me that, your mother really grieved the death of your father. They had a beautiful relationship and great love. But she wasn't overcome with despair at that point. She still had hope about her. She still was interested in other people around her. As she drew closer to the Lord, I think, at that time. And while she didn't believe that God desired my father to die the way that he did, that was a result of sin. But she believed that God was faithful to his promise and that he would be with her and with our family, and he could bring even good out of this evil. And because of that, I think the priest in the parish where I grew up in South St. Louis, St. Thomas of Aquin Parish, they took a special interest in our family and my brother and I. And priests were always close to our family. They were always great friends of our family. And so I think that's part of what got me thinking about the possibility of a vocation to the priesthood. My mother also liked to share stories with my brother and I about my father. She wanted us to know about him. And one of the things that he was very passionate about was baseball. And he went from high school right into the minor leagues. One of the stories she told us about him was that when he was a senior in high school, he was in a public high school in St. Louis at the time. And even in the public high schools then, you took Latin. And his senior year, the Cardinals were in the World Series, was one of their great teams, the Gas House Gang. They called him at that time. His Latin teacher said, if anybody skips to go to the World Series, I'm going to flunk you, no matter what else you do the rest of the year. So my dad really didn't believe that she would do that. He went to the World Series, and she was faithful to her promise. So he had to do an extra semester of Latin. But that just illustrated how important baseball was for him. He went into the Cardinals minor league system. Branch Rickey was the general manager of the Cardinals at that time. And he played on a number of teams in Texas and Florida. He was a catcher, and he caught Stan Musial when Musial was a pitcher before they figured out he was a much better hitter than he was a pitcher. The Second World War interrupted his baseball aspirations. He was drafted early in the war. My mother and my father got married shortly after he was actually drafted. My mother at the time was only 18 years old. And I remember her telling me that she told my grandfather that she was 18, practically 19, almost 20, and to convince him that this was a prudent thing. And so they got married. She followed him out to the West Coast in Oregon, where he was doing his basic training. The beginning of her marriage was really framed by the Second World War. She prayed, and my grandparents on both sides prayed for my father to return from the war, which he did, although many of those that he fought with, many of his compatriots didn't make it home. And once he got back, he didn't continue his baseball career. He began to work, and fortunately, he continued to play amateur baseball. And in 1997, almost 50 years after his death, he was inducted into the St. Louis Amateur Baseball Hall of Fame, which was it was beautiful that they remembered him all those years later. I always say I think it's good that my father never got to see me play baseball, but my mother made sure we were baseball fans, and that's always continued to be a great pastime for me. I love to follow baseball, both the Cardinals and the Royals. But getting back kind of to my vocation story, it was a very different time in our culture and society. I decided to go right out of grade school to a seminary high school in St. Louis, which wasn't unusual. I had 160 freshman classmates. There were more than 500 young men in the seminary high school. I certainly didn't know that I was called to the priesthood at that point, but I was open to the possibility I could see the difference the priesthood made in my life and in our family life. And I enjoyed my classmates, some of them today. Some became priests like I did, others not, but they're still very good friends. And those were very blessed years in many ways. But I was kind of coasting along. Everything I studied in high school I could use for almost anything else I would do. I went to the seminary college, but it was really at the end of my sophomore year of college that at that point, things got more serious. Because up until that time, again, anything I had studied I could use for almost anything else I would do in life. But after that, your junior and senior year, most of my studies would be on philosophy, which have limited applications outside of the priesthood. And it also was a very confusing time in the culture. So this was like in the late 1960s, 1969 to be precise. And the seminary had instituted just the year before a summer program for the men that were in the seminary. So between our sophomore and junior year, right in the middle of the summer, they put like this 6-week retreat. Well, I and a number of my classmates, we didn't think this was a very good idea because we had to earn money during the summer to help pay for our tuition to the seminary. So we talked to the rector about this and said, we think this is a bad idea. And he said a very useful thing that I found very helpful, and maybe you'll find helpful. He said to us, he said, gentlemen, this program is voluntary but not optional. And what he meant by that, it was voluntary if you chose to be in the seminary. But if you chose to be in the seminary, it was not optional. And so I wound up, the first of these 6 weeks was an 8-day silent retreat. And I had never been that silent for that long. But I was very confused at this time. So it's 1969. There was a lot of turmoil in our culture. The Vietnam War was being protested, the civil rights, the riots in our cities. We had suffered the assassinations by that time of John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, and Martin Luther King. There was the sexual revolution that had created a lot of upheaval within the culture and society. All of these things were going on. And of course, the Second Vatican Council had just been completed, which was bringing about a lot of change, visible change within the Catholic Church. So I was very confused. And I went to the retreat director at the beginning of the 8-day retreat, and I told him I was very confused. And he said, really? He said, you're not sure that you want to be a priest? And I said, well, yeah, I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure I'm called to be a priest, but even more, I'm not sure if I believe there is a God with all of the suffering that's going on in the world and all the chaos. And if there is a God, that Jesus is his son. He said, you are pretty confused. But he pointed me to the 11th chapter of St. Luke's Gospel. And he said, between the conferences that he gave, he wanted me to spend as much time as possible in the chapel in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament. And he said, read that 11th chapter of St. Luke's Gospel. It's where the disciples asked Jesus to teach them how to pray because they see Jesus praying. They see how impactful it is in his life. And so the Lord does teach them. He gives them what we call the Our Father or the Lord's Prayer, which is actually, it's a beautiful prayer, but it's also a catechesis on prayer as well. And then after that, he gives this parable where he talks about this man whose neighbor has unexpected guests in the middle of the night. He has nothing no bread or food to give his guest. So he goes to his neighbor next door, bangs on his door. The neighbor doesn't want to get up, but he's waking up his whole household, so he gets up because the man is persistent, and eventually he gives him some bread. And Jesus, this is one of several examples in the gospel where he teaches about the importance of persistence in prayer. So what this retreat master said to me, he said, I just want you to knock on God's door. I want you to bang on his door and ask him to reveal himself to you, to make himself present to you. And it was during that time of prayer and adoration that I experienced God's presence in a way I'd never experienced before. I mean, our family, we went to Mass every Sunday. I went to Mass every day of the week, even on Saturdays. At that time, it was before we had vigil Masses, the Sunday vigil Mass, but my mother expected us to go to Mass every day. There was no reason to miss Mass. And we had prayed the family rosary every night. That was part of our ritual in the family itself. And I always wasn't the most thrilled participant, but as I look back now, that was very formative for me. It was very important to form that relationship with Mary. And so out of this silent retreat, it became clear to me, and then the next 5 weeks, that there was nothing more important I could do with my life than to lead others to hopefully experience this God who loves us into existence and desires to share his life with us, desires to have friendship with us. I had discovered that Lord in a new and completely different way. And the doubts that I had going into the retreat were gone. And I was convinced at that point that I felt a call to the priesthood. Now, there were 6 more years to see if the church agreed with that, which fortunately they did. And I was ordained a priest on May 24th, 1975. We were asked, myself and my classmates, there were 14 of us ordained that year in St. Louis, and we were asked about how we felt the church could best use our gifts and what kind of assignment we would like. And the only request I put on my assignment was that I would like to serve in the inner city. Again, I was strongly influenced by Martin Luther King, by the civil rights movement, and I really felt a calling in some way to help bridge the racial divide within our culture and society, and to serve as a priest in some of the inner city parishes. I didn't know at the time that when you make these requests on your personnel form, that probably they're not going to be granted. And so my first assignment was to a suburban parish on the very near suburbs of the city of St. Louis, St. Dominic Savio. And it turned out to be a wonderful assignment. And those were very blessed years, those first years. I spent a lot of time working in youth ministry, and still some of those, what were young adolescents at that time, they remain good friends. My next assignment was to a parish in South St. Louis. Again, and it wasn't an inner city parish. It was, at that time, it was the largest parish in the city of St. Louis, Our Lady of Sorrows on South Kings Highway. And again, it was a very blessed time. I spent a lot of my priesthood. Again, they had a very strong youth ministry program. And that was an important part. during this time, I had a lot of weddings, had the opportunity to prepare a lot of couples for marriage. My third assignment, I finally got what I was asking for. I'm still an assistant pastor at this time. I've been a priest for 9 years. And finally, I was sent to an inner city parish, Blessed Sacrament, which was on North Kings Highway in St. Louis. But interestingly, at that time also, I'd been contacted by the priest who was the priest coordinator for the pro-life committee in St. Louis. I said, I feel passionate about the pro-life movement, but I haven't even been the priest moderator for our parish pro-life committee. I didn't feel very well equipped. And he acknowledged that. He said, but I need 3 names on this list. You're probably not going to be chosen anyway. So I was assigned to this inner city parish. But after that assignment, the Archbishop called me and he said, I know Father Boisvin has talked to you about the possibility of this pro-life ministry. I said, yes. And he said, well, I want you to do that in addition to serving at this parish. And I feel, in retrospect, I was very fortunate to have those assignments together. I would be at that parish for 4 years. And during that time, I would also be splitting time with my work as a pro-life coordinator for the diocese. And there I was brought into contact with some amazing people who were so devoted to trying to protect women from the tragedy of abortion and also save the lives of unborn children. And part of what motivated me, having grown up in a single-parent family, I felt a strong desire to help those that might be in a difficult pregnancy, who might wind up being single mothers. And how can we surround them with a community of love that would help them to choose life? And so I began that ministry. I was for 4 years at this parish. Then I was appointed a pastor, the only pastorate that I had in St. Louis, which was at Ascension Parish in Normandy. It's near where the airport is located in St. Louis. And it was a parish, again, that was predominantly African-American population at that time. There was still kind of a core group of white parishioners, Caucasians that had remained, but it was one of those places that had been redlined, and there had been a tremendous exodus of a lot of people. So I continued to be able to work in the African-American community, continued to do the work in the pro-life ministry. And again, sometimes those worlds of the church's efforts at justice and healing racial divides, and that of the pro-life committee tried to address this great human rights issue of our time. Those two communities oftentimes didn't talk. And I think part of that was the politics of it tended to divide. So it was really a privilege to be working, have a foot in both of those communities. And to me, it became obvious that, it was the same ethic that drove us in both of those communities. The sanctity of human life, the dignity of the human person, and that we believe in the dignity of the human person and sanctity of life because we believe that every human being is made in the divine image, and that every human being is of such worth that Jesus Christ gave his life on Calvary. But again, it was a very blessed time for me. Pro-life work, again, it became such an important part of my life. I was able to bring Project Rachel. We were, I think, the second or third diocese to bring Project Rachel, which is a post-abortion ministry, to the Archdiocese of St. Louis. We started what was called the Lifeline Coalition, which was a network of crisis pregnancy centers, pregnancy resource centers, as well as Catholic hospitals, as well as residential homes for mothers in a crisis pregnancy. So I was surrounded with some amazing people who taught me so much about putting the gospel into practice and proclaiming the gospel of light, as John Paul II would term it. Now we're around 1994, and a new bishop has been appointed to St. Louis. Archbishop May died several months before, and Archbishop Regali, Justin Regali, came to St. Louis. He was only there less than a year. It was in 1995, November of 1995. And I remember he asked me to come for a meeting. It was right before Thanksgiving in his office, and this was unusual. I mean, I had contact with the bishop because of my work in pro-life primarily. But when I came to his office, he said that he had 2 auxiliary bishops. They were being assigned diocesan bishops in a short time. So he said he needed a couple of vicars general, and he wanted to appoint me as one of those vicars general, and particularly for me to help him with the administration and finances of the archdiocese, which again, I didn't feel particularly well equipped to do, but he gave me a little time to pray about it. And again, kind of what I believe the charism of the diocesan priest is, it's not to kind of choose what we want to do with our life, but to be sent by the church to where our ministry is most needed. And so if I didn't have a good excuse of saying why I couldn't do something, that I had to accept it and do my best and let the church decide. So I became a vicar general in 1995. And then 2 years later, in the mystery of God's working, I was appointed an auxiliary bishop to the Archbishop of St. Louis. So this is 1997 at that time, and that began a whole new chapter in the journey. I felt very fortunate to be an auxiliary bishop. I was helping continue with a lot of my responsibilities as a vicar general, but now I had the opportunity to celebrate the sacrament of confirmation, to become liturgically comfortable with all the things that come from being a bishop. In 2003, Archbishop Regali was transferred to Philadelphia to be the archbishop there. And when there's a transition like that, there's a group that's called the College of Consultors. It's a group of priests. I was a member of that college, of leaders within the presbyterate, and they elect someone to serve as an administrator of the archdiocese until such time as a new archbishop was appointed. So I was elected to be the administrator of the Archdiocese of St. Louis. And again, that was another interesting, fortunately for me, few months. And there was a new bishop that was appointed to come to St. Louis. It was Archbishop, now Cardinal Raymond Burke. And he was to be installed in late January. But before his installation, I actually received the letter that appointed me as a coadjutor archbishop for the Archdiocese of Kansas City in Kansas. And so I came to Kansas City. It was announced on, I think it was January 8th in 2004. And I came to the Archdiocese. I was welcomed here at a massive welcome on March the 19th, which is the feast of St. Joseph, husband of Mary, as the new coadjutor to assist Archbishop Keller at that time with the Archdiocese, but with the understanding that within probably a year's time, I would assume the responsibilities. Archbishop Keller's retirement would be accepted by the Holy Father. And so that was a whole new chapter opened up. And, one of the things that I never thought that I would ever necessarily meet a pope. Well, I've wound up meeting three of them now. And I had several encounters with Pope John Paul. During my time as an auxiliary bishop, he came and made a pastoral visit to St. Louis. I was able to celebrate on a couple of occasions Mass in his private chapel in Rome. It was amazing. And then he was succeeded, of course, by Pope Benedict. Again, someone that I have incredible admiration for, incredible teacher, and so articulate in terms of being able to express what it is we believe and why we believe it. One of the things that influenced me a lot from Pope Benedict was something he said, and he wrote several times during his papacy. He said that the core of our Catholic faith is not about our doctrine, it's not about our catechism and our creed. Now, it's not that he didn't think those things were important. He had been the prefect for the Congregation of the Doctrine of Faith, and then became Pope. A lot of his ministry was defending and passing on with fidelity what we had received in terms of our Catholic faith. So he obviously thought that was important, but not the most important. He said also it's not about living an ethical life. Again, it wasn't that he didn't think this was important, but he didn't believe that was the core, the heart of what it means to be Catholic. He said at the heart of what it means to be Catholic is an encounter with the person of Jesus Christ, and an encounter with an event, the event of Calvary and the resurrection of Jesus. And I think this is so true, that our Catholic faith, that of course our doctrine and teaching, it's important. Living a moral and virtuous life is important, but none of that is going to make sense. Our doctrine isn't going to make sense. We're not going to find the capacity to live a virtuous life unless we have this relationship with Jesus Christ. So that, I think, was a great contribution. John Paul II, he had this incredible story himself of how the Lord had worked through his life in so amazing ways. And he was instrumental in bringing down communism and bringing down the Iron Curtain. But he also had this great passion for the sacredness of human life. He wrote this powerful encyclical, The Gospel of Life. And again, I was tremendously influenced by him. This great catechesis he gave on human sexuality and authentic love, the theology of the body, as it's been termed, which was a series of catechesis that he gave at his Wednesday audiences. And now, I've served under the third Pope as a bishop, Pope Francis, and I've had the opportunity on a couple of occasions to meet him and made an ad limina visit with him, which is it's supposed to be every 5 years that every bishop goes to Rome, and before visiting Rome, he presents a description of the life of the church in his particular part of the world. It goes to the Pope and the different dicasteries, different offices that assist him with his leadership of the Universal Church. And part of that, it's called ad limina, which means to the threshold, because part of that time is praying at the threshold of the tombs of the great apostles, the great bishops, Peter and Paul. But there's always a time to meet with the successor of Peter and to spend time with the Holy Father, for him to instruct us. Bishops from the United States is so large, we go by regions. So I'm part of the region of Kansas, Missouri, Iowa, and Nebraska. And he would meet with us, and each pope had a different style of doing this. Pope Francis met with us as a group for several hours, and at the beginning of the meeting, he said, I want you to be honest with me. He said, I want you to, if you have any questions, any criticisms, to feel free to make those. That's the only way this conversation is going to be fruitful and meaningful. And so have great admiration for Pope Francis, and I think one of the special things he's brought, um, elevated in the consciousness of all the churches, is our mission to bring the truth of the gospel to the peripheries, to those on the outskirts of society and culture. So that's kind of a brief description. Here in the Archdiocese, I've been incredibly blessed to be surrounded by some amazing people. We have great priests, we have great lay leaders, and some of the things that, again, I don't think I have any credit for, but there's so many amazing ministries that the Holy Spirit has raised up. One of those is the Holy Family School of Faith. Dr. Mike Schurslick and Dr. Troy Hickel together began this ministry, this work of catechizing people in the faith. When I came here, they were both teaching college students at St. Lawrence, our campus ministry at the University of Kansas. And I was so amazed at how these young people, these young college students, were taking classes with them about the scriptures, about theology of the body, about marriage and family life, and what impact they were having on these students who weren't receiving college credit, but were devoting time to these classes. And eventually, they felt called to leave campus ministry and to begin to do adult catechesis. And so one of the early things that I'd asked them to do was to help with the formation of our elementary school and our high school teachers. And that really, I think, is one of the things that, again, I'm most grateful for, this formation that we've been giving now for more than 15 years. And today it's called the Sealis Institute. It's under Donnelly College. But to equip our teachers, first of all, by helping them grow in their own faith, their own relationship with Jesus Christ and love for the church, so that they can pass that on in whatever they're teaching and be witnesses of the faith to our young people in our schools. So that's been an amazing gift to see the School of Faith blossom. And now they do this amazing ministry of these daily rosary meditations that over 100,000 people take advantage of every day from all across the United States. It was partially due to that and the Apostles of the Interior Life, and Susan Piper was an important part of this. We began this formation to become spiritual mentors. So to equip lay people to know their faith, to grow in their own relationship with Jesus Christ, and then to be able to share with others the gift of faith and to help them to grow in a prayer life and develop a close relationship with Jesus Christ as well. That's, again, one of the ministries that the Holy Spirit has really inspired. And I'm really grateful for the hundreds now that have gone through the spiritual mentorship program here in the Archdiocese. We've also been, I think, very fortunate to have so many wonderful youth ministry opportunities here and young adult ministries here in the Archdiocese. So I'm so grateful for our camp that Archbishop Keller started, and that Dana and Debbie Niermeyer have overseen all of these years, and what an impact it's had on so many young people's lives. But then they go home and impact their family's faith life as well. So there's so many, again, I think, of these amazing gifts that the Archdiocese has experienced because of the goodness of our priesthood and of our people. I think we're blessed to have communities that have come to the Archdiocese here, like the community of the Lamb, are the Franciscans, the Friends of the Poor of Jesus Christ, and most recently now, the the Sisters of the Pierced Heart of Jesus and Mary, uh, the Sisters of St. Francis of the Martyr St. George, who I became friends with them when I was in St. Louis, but they've come and helped at St. James Academy and other ministries here in the Archdiocese. So the Lord has really blessed us in so many ways, and I just feel privileged to have been a part of that these years in the Archdiocese. People ask me at this stage of my life, what do I hope my legacy will be? And certainly I hope that some of the work that I've done in the pro-life ministry will have a lasting impact, and that somehow we as a church will help our country rediscover the sanctity of each and every human life and never succumb to the culture of death that would say that a woman who's pregnant in a difficult circumstance, that the solution to that pregnancy is to kill the child within her womb. This is never a choice that's good for the mother and certainly not good for the child. And so I hope that in some small way that I've had some impact here in the Archdiocese, and I've been privileged to serve on the national level for a while, several terms as on the Committee for Pro-Life Activities for the Bishops' Conference and chairman of that committee for 3 years. And during that time, this ministry, Walking with Moms in Need, was initiated, a ministry where we really try to call upon the church to walk with women that are in a difficult pregnancy and help them discover God's plan for them. And that part of that plan is giving birth to this child and then either parenting the child or discerning that the best thing they can do for the child is to give the child up for adoption. That, again, has been an incredible privilege. I also devoted a lot of my energy and time, again, to serving the poor, those that are most in need, those, as Pope Francis would say, are on the peripheries of our society. I hope, again, that in some way I've been able to do that, which I really think is at the heart of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Those were the ones that he chose to spend time with in this earthly ministry here. And so I hope in some small way that we've contributed to that. Here in the Archdiocese, we have amazing programs that really help people to come out of poverty. I think of Donley College, which is as old as I am. And we were both born in 1949. But Donley College, where 80% of their graduates are first generation college graduates for their families. And my mother was the first one in our family to get a college diploma. And I know how that changed in many ways the trajectory of our family's life. And Donley College does that. We have amazing Catholic Charities programs here in the Archdiocese. And again, we help the poor and those that are struggling in some way to bring the love of Christ to them at times of difficulty. But we also have programs like the St. Rita ministry, which actually helps people by actually financially helping them while they go into some kind of program or educational training to acquire skills to be able to get them jobs in which they will be able to support themselves and their families. And again, this changes the lives of so many. Another important part of my ministry has been devoted to marriage and family, because everything depends really on the family. The family is the basic unit of culture and society and of the nation. And I hope that in some small way, what we've done with marriage and family life here in the Archdiocese, um, we've helped to build up the nuclear family. And marriage is the foundation of the family. And marriage is really, it's a religious calling. It's a vocation within the vocation to be a disciple of Jesus. I hope that my ministry as a priest and bishop has and somehow led people to come to know Jesus Christ, to come to know His love, come to develop a friendship, a relationship with our Lord. That's really at the heart of what the church's ministry and the priestly ministry is. It's somehow to help facilitate this encounter, similar to the encounter I had many years ago on that retreat I made between my sophomore and junior year of college, to encounter Jesus Christ, to know His presence and His love, and to seek to follow Him with our lives. He doesn't promise His disciples that life will be easy. In fact, He says the opposite to His disciples. If you're going to follow me, you have to be ready to take up the cross. But He also promises that if we do follow Him, even to Calvary, that we'll experience abundant life and complete joy as well. And so I hope in some way that my ministry as a priest and now a bishop has helped to create opportunities for people to come to encounter Jesus, to experience His love, and to strive to follow Him on the path of heroic love and the path that leads to abundant life.